Afternoon, guys. I'll try and keep you awake. I'm not can't forecast any more hurricanes this week, hopefully, but I'm not a forecaster whatsoever. My background's, funnily enough, as was mentioned, from startups. So I spent about 10 years working in startups before I took a funny squiggly line into the Met Office, which is a bit of a weird one. And my role there when I first joined was the Met Office is a trading fund, so it's public sector, but we have to make revenues to justify kind of our existence. And back in 2010, when I joined, there was the Met Office saw the opportunity to grow its reach through its digital channels and also turn that reach into revenue through advertising and sponsorship and back to the public purse. So the story I'll tell you today is about the digital team, how it's grown from what it was then 3 of us in this tiny startup within the organization to how it's kind of ballooned into 25, 30 people as business as usual. What we've done through that journey, and more importantly, how we've transformed the organization and communicated the benefits and the opportunities of digital to the wider organization. And through the talk, I'll go through a 6-stage framework that we've used. I'll try and relate it to startups because I appreciate a lot of you here are from much smaller businesses. So some of these insights are from learnings that I've experienced working for companies such as Kitbag and smaller businesses like that. And hopefully there's enough takeaways or actions that you can hopefully implement within your own organization. So this is the kind of the overview. We'll look at the Met Office Digital, our objectives. So from an objective point of view, we have relatively clear KPIs back to the organization. We have to show that we're growing our reach through digital to the whole UK public. We have to generate revenue off the back of that reach. We have to drive engagement with the public itself. And we have to grow our market share. So relatively smart and very much focused in terms of what we're trying to deliver, is relatively transparent as to are we delivering what we say we can do. We look at our competitor landscape in the weather market, which bizarrely there's quite a lot of competitors for us. Even though we're public sector, we are operating in very much a private sector commercial landscape. Looking at our strategy, and then finally the Digital Academy and the reasons why I launched that earlier this year. So the purpose, why we exist as a Met Office, going back to when we were first established in 1854, was to work at the forefront of weather and climate science for protection, prosperity and well-being. And what was mentioned in quite a lot of the talks earlier is there's a reason why all of your brands and organizations exist. It's more than just money, it's more than just lead generation. There's a reason why you all exist. And it's become pretty fundamental as to how we've changed the digital strategy of the Met Office, and more importantly, how we've differentiated ourselves against a growing competitive marketplace. That marketplace comes in many, many different ways. So even though we're the public sector, if you look at other public sector organizations, if you want to renew your driving license, you go to DVLA. If you want to renew your passport, you go to gov.uk. If you want to see what the weather's like, you can go to Google Weather now, you can go to AccuWeather, you can go to Weather Channel, the list is endless. Many, many private sector organizations have now moved into this weather market, which has been growing exponentially, mainly because of smartphone adoption. So more and more access to more and more data is becoming more and more prevalent within the UK market and globally. And for the Met Office, it's meant that traditionally as an organization, we focus very much on 5-day weather, 7-day weather, 10-day weather forecast, but so's Google Weather doing that now, and so's the Weather Channel, and so's AccuWeather. And culturally, the organization stemmed on that approach. But for us as an organization, in terms of digital, growing our reach, growing our revenue from that reach, growing our engagement, we've had to think a bit more differently as to how do we differentiate and reposition a well-established organization going back to the 1800s and making that change. And it's taken quite a while, but we are developing that and we are progressing. One of the big impacts, and actually was a big impact for us, but actually got the C-suite to suddenly begin to realize actually digital's a lot more than perhaps the fluffy stuff that we were starting to do, was welcoming Google Weather to the fold in 2014. And as you can imagine, accessing a weather forecast now 9 times out of 10, a lot of people will be quite happy with a Google weather forecast. For us, that was a huge impact in terms of how we changing ourselves. We had to think, traditionally, we were relying on weather forecasts to drive that reach. But when Google Weather arrived and access to that above the fold on a mobile device or through a desktop, it impacted our click-through rate. Google itself drives a huge majority of our organic reach. We generate around 45 to 60 million sessions a month, of which around 6 million of that through desktop is coming from Google and mobile. And it's a massive key influencer. So when we looked at this, we started to understand what is the impact and how can we start to play differently in a very, very much competitive growing landscape. So what we began to do is that and I think this hopefully echoes back to some of the talks earlier today, we got away from the shiny tactics syndrome. So I'm sure you read a lot in the press and in digital that everyone looks at digital tactics only. And if you look at a lot of digital strategies, it might be because the failure of content marketing, for example, is in the 80-90% rate. 9 times out of 10, it's because everyone's doing content marketing or SEO or pay-per-click or affiliate marketing, et cetera, in the shiny tactics. And it's not necessarily connected back to why you exist as a brand. And so what we began to do very much so is to try and reconnect what we're doing through digital, understanding where our audience is and where our users are, and how do we differentiate our brand within this competitive marketplace. So it's been about the journey that we've taken from a transformation point of view over the last 3 or 4 years has been about reconnecting our brand purpose, which is, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, understanding how do we embed tactics back to our brand purpose through this 6-stage framework. And I'll go through, I could probably present on each step of the framework, but I'm going to go through this quite quickly, but hopefully there'll be some insights here that you can start to take away to your own organization. But as James said just before lunch, understanding your why, understanding the purpose of your brand, and then understanding how users are interacting with your brand, then start to build your digital tactics. Don't start with your tactics and then worry about your strategy. It's so important, from my point of view at least. Start with your strategy, then build your tactics. So what we do from an auditing our platform, so this is base 1, the digital team, as I was saying to you, was about 3 of us. And the key driver for us is to get buy-in across the whole organization. So there's around 2,000 people in the Met Office, and that's scientists, that's forecasters, that's satellites teams, that's observers, that's librarians, that's archivists, many, many different departments that don't necessarily see the opportunity for digital. So as well as driving our reach and our revenue and our engagement, there's been a big driver from my point of view in terms of educating the wider organization, the softer skills, if you like, not necessarily the hard skills, but the softer skills in terms of getting that buy-in. And one way we do this, we send out a monthly weather summary, which includes effectively from our forecasters, our chief forecasters across the Met Office, what happened during that month, and we articulate that from an analytics point of view. So there's about 10 slides off the back of this. I'm not going to go into every single slide. This is just the top level one. But if you don't work in digital, and that's important for somewhere like the Met Office, you're trying to get that buy-in, and any organization. If you don't work in digital, you can kind of hopefully relate the impact of our reach from the different channels to how the weather is taken out. So as you can imagine, severe weather like Storm Ophelia on Tuesday, we were getting exponential, huge reach through our social channels, through our desktop, mobile, etc. But what we're trying to do here with auditing our platforms is trying to explain to the wider organization the impact weather is playing on our reach, in turn our revenue, and in turn our engagement through the different tactics we're using. And to do that, we'll look at many different options. So we'll use a number of free tools or paid-for tools internally. We're auditing our site, we're auditing our mobile site, we're understanding our competitor marketplace, what are they up to? We're looking at the impact of our site in terms of engagements and in terms of the metrics that we decide we want to use based on the objectives we're trying to deliver. That's so important as well, that you're not going overload in terms of your Google Analytics metrics. You're using the right metrics that are going to drive the right change to meet your objectives, market share, reach, and engagement. And we'll also begin to understand what are the key drivers that are driving that reach and engagement. Is it, for us, it's social media, it's syndication, and its organic reach. So our digital strategy is mainly focused around those three elements that's driving the acquisition. It's very clear, we try to make it as clear as possible in terms of trying to get that driver and wider buy-in across the organization. So from auditing a platform point of view, which we're doing on a week-by-week, month-by-month basis, we're then beginning to move then into our audience. Who is our audience? Who comes to the Met Office? Who decides to come to us compared to Google Weather, for example, or to the Weather Channel? Why do they come to us? What pages are being driven? What referral links are coming to certain areas of the website? What content is driving engagement that are compared to our competitors? There's a lot of competitor analysis that we're doing here. There's a lot of customers, literally us speaking to customers. This could be our B2B teams. Our B2B teams operate in renewables, in aviation, and various other sectors. So we're working with them as well to get them to understand who their audiences are. We look at our market trends, our market share. So we're looking at tools such as Hitwise, which I'm sure you may have come across, to understand better how are we operating in a market share point of view in terms of the weather market in the UK. And we'll also use mosaic profiling. If you've come across this is a tool that we used a few years ago, and it helps us articulate who our audience is across the organization, which we will share across our organization, whether they're digital teams or non-digital. But from an advertising point of view, our reach point of view, and our engagement, i.e. our social media team, this is a one script piece of work that we do, which segments the UK audience into around 25 different segments, but understands how we're going to try and drive reach and engagement to this type of audience. So for example, this one here, modern agribusiness, there's key points from Hitwise, who they are, where they reside, type of information that they're interested in. From our advertising and sponsorship team, we then pull together some insights as to how we could create content to appeal to that type of audience. And these are the websites that they also interact with. So from a measurement point of view, it's very clear, and it brings together 3 or 4 different departments to work on together into certain segments of different audiences that are already being attracted to the Met Office, or perhaps audience or segments that are not attracted to the Met Office at the moment. Fundamentally, this has been a big change in terms of how do we differentiate ourselves. And the title of this presentation was Building a Knowledge Centre. A knowledge centre is being defined from our point of view is from our own keyword research, especially around Google Analytics and keyword research tools. There has been a huge opportunity in the weather market to provide the what, the why, the where, the when. Many of our competitors are saying to you provide weather data. They don't provide the what, the why, the where, the when. And if you come to the Met Office, and you can come if you like, they do various tools, if you're interested in that sort of thing, there's around 750 scientists from around the world. These people have vertical knowledge in jet streams, in forecasts, in typhoons, in hurricanes, huge amount of knowledge that sits in the Met Office. And so what we began to find out, this is using a strategy called Blue Ocean strategy, which I'd recommend you have a look at. It's all about how brands can move into the blue ocean. Red ocean is defined as competitive, cutthroat markets that we're all operating in. Blue ocean is understanding new opportunities and new markets that your brand could move into. And from the Met Office point of view, this art of storytelling, building knowledge around the what, the why, the where, the when around the weather, there isn't necessarily a competitor to us that can provide that insight. It's a bit similar to National Geographic or Reuters News. They provide that in-depth, insightful information. They're not necessarily looking for vanity reach. They're looking for that more in-depth knowledge. And so we began to plot out along here some of the key points that we all compete on in terms of our competitors. And then the green here shows new opportunities in terms of how do we differentiate ourselves. So the Met Office, we work with around 130 other global Met services around the world. We're partnering with our scientists. So this has been about transforming how digital operates in the Met Office away from one silo, working across the organization, working with our scientists and our forecasters to provide us the answers to the what, the why, the where, the when around the keyword research and social listening. And obviously our national severe weather alerts, which I'm sure you all get through our app. No. Some people signed up to the app, downloaded it, great. So we have this authority around the brand, and what we've done is deliberately through syndication and building partnerships, we've focused away from just weather data, weather forecasts, which we have to do, but also began to fill the brand around this, the what, the why, the where, the when. And what that's allowed us to do, it's allowed us to build syndication with many, many organizations, filling a need that wasn't there before, that another brand wasn't providing. And bizarrely, from a Google point of view, it's been fantastic for our SEO because it's answering questions. When does spring start? And we're finding more and more of our content is now appearing in the knowledge graph, which is allowing us to differentiate our brand to become this knowledge center for this authority information. It's so much so pushed that way where we're getting brands now working with the Met Office or speaking to the Met Office around our content, not our weather data, our weather forecasts. So, for example, Twitter Moments saw the opportunity from their own user research and analytics that around the weather, they too themselves were finding that users on Twitter were looking more for the what, the why, the where, the when. And when Twitter Moments was launched a few years ago, they approached the Met Office, which we do on a weekly basis, providing them with storytelling around the weather, which we provide through our studio internally in Exeter, and focus it around events that are happening around the year, and providing that type of content to Twitter. So from a syndication point of view and building our reach through weather storytelling, it's allowed us to differentiate what we offer. And this is kind of the process that we follow in the Met Office. We do a lot of, as I was explaining to you earlier, keyword research, huge amount of keyword research and social listening. We'll do a lot of understanding our audience better, whether that's qualitative or quantitative insights, going out there, speaking to our audiences in different B2B or B2C. We'll then start to build that content, that creation of that content, the what, the why, the where, the when. We'll start to categorize that content. Is it real time, like on Tuesday with Stormophilia? Is it seasonal? Glastonbury Music Festival, the pollen forecast, will it snow? What is a rainbow? We have a library of content that we've been building now. Are we going to use video and graphics? Are our users going to be interacting with video and graphics? Not necessarily just saying we have to have video and graphics, but from analytics, do our users engage in video content or graphical, or is it just text-based information that they're interested in? And finally, through this huge library of content, how are we going to distribute it? Have we optimized it for search? Is our content strategy also including social? So how are we going to drive that through what channels through social media? Are we syndicating the same bit of content? So we're repurposing the same bit of content across our syndication channels. So there's that Yahoo that we work with, or MSN, or Twitter Moments, or The Guardian. And different types of channels in terms of other blogs, other forums that we're working with, other scientific journals that we're working with globally as well. So this is kind of a process that we use to try and define it in terms of a framework, if that makes sense, in building that narrative. Creating that narrative, I was talking to you about keyword research. So organic search is very, very important for the Met Office. We spent a lot of time keyword mapping, looking at the longer tail and the short tail or head terms on the whole UK weather market. This is just to give you a quick breakdown, but we have piles and piles of spreadsheets. And what we're doing is connecting the insights, the quantitative insights. So these are search terms here. These are the search volume here. The X marks where we rank in Google. And obviously, we use various click-through rates, understanding our positioning. How do we differentiate that positioning? Are we using featured snippets? Are we going to be using video to surface that content through Google? And then it's about plugging these gaps, working with our scientists or our forecasters to help us create that content. Stuff like Google Trends is a fantastic free tool that you can use for your own organization. So one of the areas that we've built out over the years is building these content hubs. So we have an events calendar which allows us to target seasonal reach activities, whether that's Six Nations Rugby or Glastonbury Music Festival. Not necessarily talking about the musical event, but it's contextualizing weather to that type of audience, which we're then building out new audiences to come to the Met Office. And then using seasonal dashboards. So for example, it's pretty bad in terms of the graphic here, but this is for pollen and hay fever, understanding what the public or users are searching for and giving those insights to our scientists. So we're not necessarily talking in a 16-syllable word that scientists might use for pollen or hay fever, but we're using the terminology that users are looking for when they're looking for information around the pollen or the hay fever season. And all of these insights come together internally, which we then can start to work across the organization, building out the knowledge center. And this is the type of thing that we do on a month-by-month basis, where all of these insights we're providing feedback to the wider teams across the organization. So in non-analytical terms, if the satellites team's been working with us for some graphical elements that we're using through social media, what was the impact of that? How did we measure the performance of that? What insights could we provide back to the scientists or satellites teams so they themselves can get educated and better understand how they can work with us going forward? Building that narrative, and like I said, a lot of this narrative is seasonal, and it's a calendar-based, and it's away from the severe weather. We know severe weather drives huge incremental reach to the Met Office, but it's plugging these gaps when the weather is relatively quiet, and it's providing a form of personality as well to the Met Office in terms of what we're doing. So this is just the type of information, education, the what, answering the what, the why, the where, the when around weather data, which more and more users are looking for. And this is built around, obviously, building the authority of the Met Office domain. Any organization, don't rely so much on your social media. Don't build your brand on rented land, as they say. It's about building your authority on your own brand. And what we'll do is that we'll build all this content on our own platform, but then look to segment it on the various different channels that we use, whether that's Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or Twitter. Our social team can then better understand what works on Twitter versus what works on Facebook. Do we need to focus more on LinkedIn for B2B, or is it syndication that we need to focus on? So each element has its own digital plan, if you like, or strategy as to how it delivers that owned content in terms of that focus of what we're building out through that huge keyword research and social listening that we're doing. And it comes together, you can't beat a spreadsheet, but it comes together in sharing this across the organization. So our scientists have access to this, our forecasters, our librarians, our archivists, where we break it down into seasons of the year, and we keep it as simple as possible. And in terms of they know when they need to be working with us, what type of content they need to be providing, or they themselves can suggest areas of content, storms, hurricanes that are impacting globally in terms of us building out more and more of this knowledge, especially as we move into voice search. We are hoping that this longer tail approach, the what, the why, the where, the when, is going to allow us again to differentiate from just providing weather data. Tools to use. So here's some free tools that you could use yourselves. If you're looking at ways to how do I actually understand what people are looking for and audiences are looking to understand what I could be providing. Here's some fantastic tools that we use in the Met Office that I've used in previous life in startups. The first one is obviously pays you a bit of money in terms of probably a coffee down at the local coffee shop, but just go and speak to your audience, whoever you are. Brilliant insights that you can get. Most of these are free. And they provide you with a starting point in terms of your content marketing approach, in terms of answering the questions that your audience has. It's the best way to start, and in terms of building that knowledge and measuring the impact that that's having. A good example of this, I'm just moving away from the Met Office. Has anyone come across River Pools and Spa? The American-based company that sells swimming pools. If you go onto YouTube and have a look at it, there's a 2-minute video. And I think it's one of the best examples of content marketing in action. They sell swimming pools. So you would literally go to a showroom, look at their swimming pools, and obviously over a long frame of mind, understand if you're going to buy a swimming pool, a lot of money. In the recession, they were massively impacted. So what the founder did, Marcus Sheridan, was decided to take content to the customers rather than waiting for customers to come to him. He literally went through all the FAQs, he went through the customer service, he went through libraries of insights that they had, all the questions, the struggles that customers have in terms of buying a swimming pool. Should I buy a swimming pool? Shouldn't I buy a swimming pool? How should the water be laid? When do I refuel it with new water, etc.? You can imagine streams and streams of content. He turned the brand into a content knowledge center. So anything that you want to know about, should I buy a swimming pool or not, there's content that's been written about that. So it's a classic example of writing content based on what users want, not necessarily what the organization thinks. It's a very change in mindset, but it's a brilliant example to take a look at. And that's building your story is around that. It's about looking at insights and mining your own information inside your organization to build out this knowledge center and to get that buy-in from across the organization. From a social media point of view, that's what we do. We call it help and support. So from a social media point of view with the Met Office, it's all about humans answering questions that the public have coming into the Met Office. So from Twitter, if you tweet the Met Office, you should get a reply within half an hour. Shouldn't have said that. But anyway, you should get a reply in half an hour. If you tweet the Met Office and ask them a question, you'll get a human replying to you. So it's that point of difference. It's differentiating ourselves from our competitors, and it's using our forecasters' knowledge to build that relationship with the end users. CD Baby is another good example. I've just come on to them. They are a music-based business, and they've transformed their whole organization, a bit like river pools and spas, by answering the questions small startup musicians have. How do I boost my income? How do I promote my music? When can I take out a recording studio? They've built their whole content brand around answering the questions solo musicians have. I'll just come on to, because I've only got literally 3 minutes, but one of the key things of talking about transformation is, this is what I kicked off in February this year, and it's about this story that we've taken is all very well in organizations if you have a digital marketing team. The problem is that you need the whole organization bought into what you're doing. So back in February, we launched some digital principles across the Met Office. And these are 4 key principles that we're trying to upskill the wider organization around digital. Hopefully not really wanting to use the word digital. But to turn these principles to life, we launched the Digital Academy. And the Digital Academy was built to encourage organizations that are operating in this in the real world to come into the Met Office and educate all of our departments. So we have about 40, 45 people coming to each Academy session. I'll then create keyword research plans off the back of that. How do I build a content marketing plan? So it's all very measurable. If our B2B teams are coming or our librarians are coming, it's not only connecting the dots between different departments, it's also upskilling this wider organization of the Met Office to realize they all play a role in digital. You don't have to be in the digital marketing team. That's the key thing. It's a cultural, behavioral change. And we're seeing the impact of this now, where we're seeing many, many other departments across the Met Office now wanting to engage in content marketing, see the value in their own insights that they can share with the digital team to drive our reach and engagement. But I guess it's transforming the organization bottom up rather than top down. And we're seemingly, hopefully, this is progressing now. It's coming into its year, and it's helping us transform and widely upskill the organization. So some key takeaways, finally, just to ask yourself, what is the purpose of your digital marketing plan? Is it literally sitting in a silo in your organization, or does it have wider buy-in across your organization? And what can you do to get that wider buy-in? Have you mapped your situation? Who is your audience? Who are your competitors? Have you audited your channels? Do you audit your channels wherever you reside? Have you set some key objectives that what you're wanting to deliver? Are they tied right back to the C-suite as to what you're going to be delivering through digital? Have you defined a point of difference? What is your USP in your marketplace? How can you create a point of difference if no one else has decided to do that? And what could you be doing differently that no one else is doing? Build your narrative, build that storytelling around your USP to differentiate yourself, and build that help and support, and use social media to help and support your own audience and wider audiences. And finally, and I think the most important thing, it's the attitude and the culture. It's educating your wider organization to inform and train around digital marketing. They don't have to be in digital to contribute and add value to what you're trying to do, because at the end of the day, the whole organization needs to be behind it. It can't be done in one siloed department. And that's it. All right.